Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I am your host, Mary Catherine Ham. I am here with my co-host, Vic Mattis of the Washington Free Beacon. There's a lot going on, as always, but a lot this summer. This summer's not going to slow down, folks. Just everybody buckle in. We've got some pretty serious economic news, some throwback news from 9/11 that we're going to update you on. Trump's in Georgia shooting himself in the foot. Kamala Harris has picked a VP candidate, and we've got some news from the Olympics, from the pole vault. We'll get into that. It might be, maybe need a little content warning on that. Before we get to all that, how are you doing, Vic?
Hello, Mary Catherine. Doing fine. Yes, I love to say that this is an emergency podcast episode but the timing just happened to be perfect. Right before we started, we were texting and you said, well, we can't do Veep Steaks because we're recording in the morning and we won't, who knows when she's going to make the announcement. And suddenly at 9 o'clock, it had leaked.
She has obliged us.
That's it. So here we are. For once in our lives, the timing is perfect. Before we get to that, doing fine, I want to thank you for your restaurant recommendation because I was in Tom's River to see my father and my sister's family, but I took my dad out to Patricia's in Tom's River where you had been before me. And I grew up in this town. That's what's amazing. But it is, as anyone knows from that part of the state, it's hard to keep up with Italian restaurants there. It's like the equivalent of the Chinese coal power plants. You know, there's like one opening up every week. It's the same thing in Jersey. There's a new restaurant every week. And Patricia's has come, it's originally from the Bronx and it was down here. It's like they don't spend any money really on the decor. It's a hard floor. It's dark in there. And they put all of that money into the portions.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to tell you, I saw the lobster pasta and I was tempted to get it. But as you know, Mary Catherine, I am mindful, being pre-diabetic, about my A1C. And so listeners can't see her rolling her eyes.
It's not the time to worry about that.
Yeah. And so I ended up with not just the veal parm, but the French cut bone-in veal parm. So I'm sure that was much healthier. It took up the entire plate. I basically had a calf. I ate the calf. And this is the thing. A restaurant like this would do so well, I think, in this town, like in DC, DC's always in search of, again, authenticity. And with the exception of like Ben's Chili Bowl and places like that, everywhere else, you open it up and people go nuts, right? And Five Guys, which is an original Virginia establishment. But if they open up just a normal Italian restaurant, there are fancy Italian restaurants in this town, really high-end ones like Iriki, Fiola Mare. There's the guy that carves tableside, the Iberico ham. But how many of these places can you just get a simple veal parm?
Yeah,
or a veal parm sandwich?
I have rarely had both so generous and so good a portion together. Right? You get generous portions of mediocre food, or you get really small portions of very good food. This is our sweet spot, Vic.
It really is. And I have to tell you, if you can find a Patricia's in the sort of the tri-state or bi-state area, you got to go because it was so good. It was down to the bone. And not only that, and then I had a cannoli, which actually was two cannolis, and a little decaf espresso. Because, I'm mindful of my blood pressure.
Of course.
So there's that. And here's the other thing. Many restaurants in New Jersey, as you know, are BYOB. And some people think of it as a pain. I think it's a great idea.
I think it's lovely. I didn't know this was a thing until I went.
Oh, my gosh. Every table, I looked around at Patricia's, every table, there was a couple or a family, and there were bottles of wine, and you can get something that's economically priced, whatever you want to drink, your choice. It's your wine. You can't send it back.
So what's the story with that? The blue law is just that, or is it just restaurants that are low overhead trying not to deal with liquor licenses and
That's right. That's right. You can get a liquor license, and there are a couple Italian restaurants that I know where you can get a drink, and it's okay. And you have to assume maybe the bartender is good, and he'll make a nice cocktail for you. Obviously there are places that have bars, but they're not exactly common. It's not like here in DC.
I mean, not to cast aspersions or anything, but I would think that the Italian families would be the better ones at getting the liquor licenses.
Somebody was telling me about wanting to open up run a liquor store in actually it was listeners to the show, but I'm not going to mention their names because I want to get them in trouble. But a fella who worked at a liquor store in New Jersey, and there was something to that. I'm just going to say there was something to that, but I'll just say Leave it as is. I had a wonderful bottle of Nebbiolo. It was great to see my father, then up to Connecticut to see my in-laws. Everything was wonderful. That's it. Back to the back to the grind. Mary Catherine, how are you?
I am good. I hope everybody listened to my interview with Charlie Spearing, who really has a handle on the whole arc of Kamala Harris's career. That book, Amateur Hour, is definitely worth a read. You'll get through it quickly and you'll have a lot more sort of information for this process. And since the media thus far is not interested in giving you information about Kamala Harris, I thought you might enjoy that.
Was it uplifting and awe-inspiring information?
It was not. It was not. Just a programming note, I guest hosted Perino on Politics this week, Dana Perino's podcast, if you want to check that out. I am down in North Carolina at the
Oh,
beach with the kids because the kids go to camp in North Carolina. So I came down to get them and I brought the babies with me down to get them, which is a bit of an adventure. They are in and this works on our behalf when we're at home. They are creatures of habit, the babies. They are far more scheduled than my first two kids were because Steve is a more scheduled person.
regimented.
As a single mom with my two older kids, was pretty all over the map. Now, they were good sleepers and good kids, and I didn't really have too much problem with it anyway. But these two are real creatures of habit. And when you take them out of the habit, they're not always happy about that. And this can happen with all babies. When you're traveling, it takes them a day and a half to get used to the new situation. So in this case, I am in a lovely guest room with the two babies in their pack and plays, which is fine. We made crazy good time coming down here. We left at 6:30 in the morning because when you tell Steve you want to be on the road at 6:30 in the morning, he is getting you on the road at 6:30 in the morning.
Nice.
He has to work, so he's back home. So we're on the road at 6:30 in the morning. Steve, logistics officer, and a huge shout out to him because, some dads could learn this skill. I pack the clothes for the kids. He packs everything else they need. Swimmy diapers, regular diapers, sippy cups, extra bottles, formula, anything we need. Oh, first aid kit. It is in a box in the car and it is ready to go.
That's like Kate. She does all that and the other part too.
Right.
It's just,
I
have enough problems figuring out my wardrobe.
That's the more traditional model. And
I know. Guilty.
So anyway, we get on the road, we get down here. I'm in a room with two babies and they are doing okay, but I would say not sleeping their best. And
No, it's because they're out of their element, right?
right. And so the
okay.
toddler, who is now almost 3, is now climbing out of her crib. We've discussed that. And on the road, she's more apt to do that because she's not going straight to sleep because she doesn't understand where she is or what's happening.
Yeah, what's happening? New place.
So in this new place, she's decided that she wants to sleep in the big girl bed.
Oh.
And I, perhaps against my better judgment, in the middle of the night have allowed her to do so. So she is coming into the big girl bed with me, and she's done quite well.
Okay.
But today she woke up around 4:45 in the morning. And
that's too early.
if she were in her room by herself, or if I were not in this room with her, she'd be fine. She'd probably cry for a few minutes and go back to sleep.
Yeah.
But I'm next to her. So she's like,
oh.
hello.
Yes, this is exciting. Very exciting.
And this was the solution we came up with, or rather her. I said, do you need a hug? Because she's crying. And I give her a hug and she flattens herself just on top of me. I'm pinned in the bed and she falls back asleep. So I just have a 40-pound toddler on top of me. And I just thought, okay, well, if I can't sleep, I just won't move. I'll just stay here and everything will work out.
Think of it as a 30-pound down.
Yeah, actually, you know what? That is
people pay for that.
That's a weighted blanket.
It's a very weighted blanket. Some people really like that. So
So I got probably an extra half hour, 45 minutes of rest that way. And then everyone was up by 5:30.
Yeah. Happy vacation.
Yeah. So we'll run them ragged until they're nap and then attempt that as well. And we'll see what happens.
Well, here's what I can tell you, Mary Catherine. Eventually you'll get to sleep in, but then by that time you're so old, you wake up early.
I know. Oh, I already do. I already do.
That's
It
me.
doesn't even
I'm
hurt
up
me to wake
early. I
up.
got to use the bathroom.
Yeah, waking up at 5:30 is like, we might as well just
Right.
start the day. Okay,
Yeah.
so I was up before the sun rose, and here we are delivering news. I got to catch
But
up
that's
on a
kind of
lot of
nice on the
news
beach,
this
though. When you're
morning.
on the shore, it's nice. So
This is true. It was pretty out, and the weather is temperate before this tropical storm comes through. Okay. Well, Kamala Harris, the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party after having been installed in that position after Biden was removed from it,
yeah.
has picked a VP candidate after much hemming and hawing and showmanship, sort of stretching it out. It was announced that she would make an announcement today, last week. The choice is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, he was reportedly one of the two finalists, the other one
Yeah.
being Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, who we have talked about on the show. There's a lot to say here. It seems like Walz is certainly more of a sop to the left leaning part of the party. He's sort of a double down progressive candidate in the same way that JD Vance is a double down
Oh,
double down Trump populist candidate
that's right.
for Trump. So you've got two very different perspectives here, doubled down on both tickets. These two guys, Walz and Vance, both come from some of those blue wall Rust Belt states that is important to both candidacies, but neither one from a state that is super electorally important. Minnesota is likely blue. Ohio is likely red. These are ideological friend tickets, right?
Right. Right.
That's what this is. What do you think of that play, Vic?
I thought the same thing, Mary Catherine. It seems clear nobody really wants the independents and undecideds in the middle of America. They're all solidifying their base. But it baffles me because it baffled me when Trump picked Vance because, I mean, I joke around about that I knew he was going to pick Vance because the rumor was one syllable, Trump Vance. Okay, so there's that. And certainly Vance is very smart, but he's not, I mean, ideologically, it's a very specific and very distinct pick for somebody that he wanted who was very populist. But again, after the assassination attempt, I mean, Trump should not have been worried that he was going to lose any of these voters. They're in it for him. They weren't going to vote for Biden. They're certainly
Right.
not voting for Kamala. So that baffled me that he did not end up wanting to pick Doug Burgum in North Dakota or Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia. And then likewise with Walz, late last night, I had been flipping back and forth. So I want to know what your thought process was on this. At first I thought, okay, it's going to be like Bashir or Shapiro, maybe Mark Kelly of Arizona, the senator. And then we heard it was going to be Shapiro and Walz. Well, the only common denominator is that Shapiro was in this running the entire time. And I thought to myself, Shapiro is going to be too much of a hassle for Kamala to pick because, well, he's not only Jewish, which I think some voters on her side of the aisle would have a problem with, which is sad to say, but certainly, if they're concerned about Muslim voters wanting to vote for somebody, who not only keeps the Sabbath, but is pro-Israel. So
Right.
he's a Zionist. And then he hasn't renounced that. There's other things that Josh Shapiro has turned around against very disappointingly, but he's somebody also who is tough on crime and he's pro-charter schools. That would be somebody you would want to pick if you wanted to win the middle, which is currently up for grabs. And then I thought, it's too much of a hassle because you're going to have all these protests at the Democratic convention. It's going to be Walz. And then I thought at the very, very end, you know what? Assuming the worst of all worlds for Republicans, it's going to be Shapiro because if you want to win, this is the thing, Mary Catherine, and I'll lob it back to you. You're assuming if you pick Shapiro, yes, there's going to be some sort of an uproar or protest in Chicago. There already is going to be. They're worked up over this. That's
Right.
the first thing. The second thing is Shapiro already flip-flopped on things like Palestinians. He says, that paper I wrote, I was 20. My bar mitzvah, I was 13. I mean, it's kind of pathetic, but why would he be bending over backwards for that anyway? But you're going to build in this, you're gaming out this situation where if you pick Shapiro, you win Pennsylvania. And if you win Pennsylvania, then it opens up multiple electoral paths. You can win Pennsylvania, and I think you can lose maybe Nevada, Arizona, or Nevada, Wisconsin. Then you still got it. This makes it more complicated. And I have thoughts about Waltz, but back to you first, and then I'll go back to Waltz.
Yeah.
What was your thought process on this? And did you feel it? Were you surprised or were you vindicated?
So I would say that my gut said Shapiro is too many headaches for these folks,
Right.
and they have shown no propensity in the Biden administration, which she is a part of, even though the
Yeah.
media would like to never remind us of that. They have shown no ability to stand up to a loud, medium-sized group in their party that
Yeah.
is very upset with anyone who's pro-Israel and would be upset with a Jewish man on the ticket.
Right.
Let's just say the
Sad
thing.
to say. Yeah.
I
Sure.
didn't think that she could stand up to them. And I thought if she did, it might seal the deal for her because she gets an electoral play out of a very popular governor of Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And she gets a Sister Soldier moment where she stands up to a loud minority in her party that is out of step with most Americans, right?
Yeah.
That's a nice twofer. And I
Yeah.
thought if she does that, she's playing to win.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about Harris that we discovered talking to Charlie Spearing. She's good at getting jobs. She's not good at doing the job, but she's
good
good
at
at
getting it.
getting to those jobs. So I thought, okay, there's a possibility that she does this, but my gut said they're not going to pull the lever on that. And indeed, they haven't. The announcement, nonetheless, is in Philadelphia, which a lot of people were reading as this means Shapiro. But
Yes.
in fact, VPs are often announced not in their home state, even if it is an electoral play. They're often announced elsewhere. I believe, for instance, Paul Ryan, I think, was announced in Colorado, maybe.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
they mix it up on that
Yeah.
front. But I'm going to steal this from Liam Donovan on Twitter, who said, you can make either an electoral play picking your VP, you can
Mhm.
make a do no harm pick, or you can pick a best player on the board. And to me, Shapiro was electoral play and best player on the board.
Yeah. I'd
And
agree with that.
but a reason that he's popular in Pennsylvania, by the way, because he's got huge numbers in Pennsylvania, is because he doesn't toe the party line or the left-wing line on Israel.
Yeah.
He had more sensible COVID restriction policies than other Democratic figures. There is the crime issue that he's better on than some lefties, and on school choice, even being nominally in favor of any flexibility for parents is
Charter schools.
something that is anathema to the left. This is a part where I thought this might have been underplayed. I wasn't sure the unions were going to let that happen. If you have uttered a word
Mhm.
on that front, are they going to let you pass? But anyway, so
They're thrilled now.
I thought he was, good for all of these reasons. Walz, on the other hand, is, again, a double down on your progressive
Mhm.
policies. He's from Minnesota, which is a safe state for them in all likelihood. And he's perhaps most known for letting Minneapolis burn in 2020.
That's right. The
Which-
police station.
That
You
brings
let
a
a police
whole
station burn.
different vibe and a
Mhm.
conversation back into the conversation that I'm not sure they want to be having.
He waited. You almost thought he was going to wait until they reached the governor's mansion before they decided to call in the National Guard. He waited days for that.
Yeah.
So, okay, I was thinking something similar along those lines, but really, until now, right, what we've seen with Kamala is what the campaign wants us to see, right? How they're packaging her. And she has now, we don't know what she's thinking. She's now gone 16 days, I think, without an interview. Usha Vance, I think we were going to mention, she's done more interviews than she has.
Yeah, that seems like an interesting stat.
Yes.
That Usha Vance, the wife of the Republican Party's VP candidate, has taken more questions in the last 2 weeks than the nominee for the Democratic Party who went through no primary and has not been asked questions before now in any sort of like systematic way. That is a shocking stat. And I cannot imagine if it was the other way around.
Even a friendly interview.
Oh, like the number of columns, the number of White House Correspondents Association press releases and official letters that would be devoted to saying this person must take questions would be off the charts.
Yeah.
Off the charts.
Yeah. I mean, Kamala hasn't even done like something very friendly, say, on MSNBC, She hasn't appeared on Joy Reid's show or something, or The View for that matter, since she's become the nominee.
Well, and
Uh,
Vance appeared on Fox News, and she was asked questions that were critical
yeah,
about her husband's
right,
comments and record.
right.
Look at that.
So, I mean, so this is the thing. The choice of Tim Walz, obviously, she had to be a part of that decision-making process, and it's really the first insight into Kamala's thought process. Now, I can only imagine the back and forth in the room about Shapiro versus Waltz and Kamala and her people, and I imagine that was a very tense, uncomfortable conversation that she was having. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a matter, as you would say, of wanting to win Pennsylvania and opening up these electoral pathways. It was just simply a bridge too far for Kamala to have him as her running mate. It's like, there are limits to the whole identitarian politics here. You have somebody who could be our first, South Asian slash Black female president. And on top of that, a Jewish vice president. No, it was too much. They couldn't do it.
I do have to note, and I love this tidbit. This comes from the chief White House correspondent for NBC News, who reports as of last night, VP Harris had not yet made a final decision and wanted to sleep on it one more night, according to a source familiar with the process. This source tells me the Harris campaign has printed signs with Harris's name and multiple different possible VP picks beneath it, so they are prepared for whatever decision she makes. Look, he seems like a reliable reporter who does have sourcing here, but
Mhm.
it's just so on brand. Like
Oh, yeah.
minimal,
Peter Alexander. Yeah.
yes, Peter Alexander, minimal leadership, maximum pain in the ass. Like,
Yes. Do you know what I want, Mary Catherine? I want the Harris Buttigieg poster. That's the one, collector's item.
collector's item. There will be several of them available to us. So apparently that's how that went down. I do think to play devil's advocate, look, each pick has upsides and downsides. And I
Okay.
would say, as some of my trusted left-leaning folks in my Twitter feed have been remarking, Walz could not only be seen as, yes, a lefty, but also a nod toward a sort of non-credentialism, because he's
Sure.
not the Ivy League guy.
No, he's not pedigreed like
He's
that. Yeah.
he's not the private school dude. He's
Right.
not that type, and he
Right.
reads not that type, right? He's got an ability to seem a little folksy. Maybe he's like a state school socialist, you know?
Yeah, yeah, no, well, I mean, this is the thing. I jokingly thought, how she wanted to counterbalance the ticket Kamala Harris was. And I thought, well, she certainly found somebody who is the antithesis of Kamala Harris physically.
Right.
Like, you not only got the right guy, you got the old white guy. Okay, so there's that, and a big fella. But policy wise, no. I mean, they're obviously on the same page. He wouldn't have to say he's flip-flopped on any number of things the way Shapiro might have been forced to disappointingly say, I don't
Although
know.
he might have to flip-flop on some things because she continues flip-flopping on some
Right.
things.
Yeah. But we don't know because nobody's interviewed her.
Nobody's talking to them.
So, like, Waltz 1.0, you're right. I mean, he was interesting, I mean, a rural background, military service. He was a teacher. He flipped the red congressional district
right.
as a congressman in Minnesota. But again, 2.0, he's definitely progressive. He had that quote, everyone's going to be just on the right in the campaign. The Trump campaign is going
Hold
to be
on one
reminding
second. I
people of
think
his
my
quote
internet
about
got a little funky.
socialism being another person's neighborliness.
Yeah, I think the neighborliness comment is that one focus group just to annoy me, because no, it's not
Between that and, yeah.
It's in fact not neighborly to use the power of the state to take other people's money to give it to things that you wish to give it to. That's not very neighborly
No.
at all.
And I think the job is made easier for the Republicans in the Trump campaign, because all you have to do is show pictures of fiery but mostly peaceful protests and ask voters, is this what you want? Is this who you want as your vice president or part of this ticket? Or people who, were defund the police, Minnesota bail fund, and let Minneapolis burn to the ground, including the police station?
I think that's a fair question, because that's what this ticket was into. And a lot of people, even those who are not very ideological, I would say especially those who are not very ideological, would like to live in safe communities. And they would like to know that government does the bare minimum of being concerned about their safety and is invested in policing both sides of the ideological spectrum when it comes to looting and rioting and setting things on fire. And a lot of people do not have that assurance. And a lot of people do not have that assurance because people like Walz and Harris are very invested in only punishing one side and telling you that the other side is just expressing some really deep feelings,
Yeah.
and that's okay. And I just think that's not a winning message in a team nationally. I would also note Jim Garrity has some great although he demurs and says it's not reporting, it's just Googling for a few minutes, which some other reporters should maybe try. But
Other reporters call that reporting, by the way.
yes, but he notes that he goes through the various scandals that the Minnesota state government has endured
Oh,
while Walz has been governor. It turns out that they may also be doubling down on people who cannot manage anything. So Walz, this one jumped out to me. Walz oversaw the Feeding Our Future fraud scandal, which was a COVID era program built to give families who are in need
yeah.
food. And it is the largest fraud scandal of the entire COVID relief era. And there was just so much money, a
Yep.
$250 million in federal funds that went to purchase luxury cars, houses, jewelry, and coastal resort property abroad. This was overseen by the Minnesota state government, and
Hmm.
the Minnesota Department of Education was asleep at the wheel, even though there had been all sorts of red flags thrown on this thing. That's just one of several pretty large mismanagement scandals. Hero pay went
Hmm.
to dead people in that state, stuff that was meant for frontline workers during the pandemic. Plenty of fraudsters in there. He did not follow procedures for avoiding conflicts of interest when it came to awarding grants for arts and behavioral health. Look at that. I mean, it's just
Well,
like
yeah.
over and over you see these problems.
I will say, in defense of the COVID charge of the COVID fraud thing, there was so much money going around. I do think that if you could just, you mentioned all those purchases, but if you could throw in a couple boxes of masks, then I think you're good. They'll say,
You
as
know
long
what?
as
Look at it this way. It's truly a superlative to to be able to boast the most wasteful of
yeah.
the COVID relief programs because
Yeah.
it's tough competition, my
No,
friend.
no, no. It really, it's sort of like being in the mafia at JFK Airport. I mean, it's just a free for all. You can just take whatever you want. It's just no one's keeping track of these things. Mary Catherine, how do you think the Chicago convention is going to go now that we know it's Harris Waltz?
I think
Any different?
they're still going to have noise,
Yeah.
um, particularly if, and we can talk about this as we move forward. Particularly if a Middle East war continues to
Oh, yeah.
heat up. And eventually, someone who's running for president, one would assume,
Hmm.
will face questions about that, and she will have to be less dovish than they want her to be. She will have to be less willing to blame Israel for everything than they want her to be. She's also going to be more willing to blame Israel
Right.
than anyone who's pro-Israel wants to see her.
Yeah.
But that's if she gets asked a question.
Right. I mean, this is the thing. She's been really given a lot of help from the media right now because, I mean, if she can be protected all the way to the fall, that'll be great. And I still not sure if they did, in fact, agree to a debate. Maybe they did with Trump.
Well,
It
I
was
think
supposed to
what
be
we have
September
right now, and
6th instead of September 8th. I'm not sure they moved the
yeah,
dates around, but that's
by the
something for
way,
them to worry about.
this is yet another place where we're being gaslit. This idea that there was a debate on the calendar.
Right.
Nope.
There was one with another
There was a
guy.
debate with another candidate planned.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now Kamala Harris has to girl boss her own debate. She has to make that happen. She has to do
Yeah.
negotiations. And I don't understand why our friends on the
Right.
left are so convinced that this little lady can't do that for herself and that she must be bequeathed the terms that that this enfeebled old man negotiated, which, by the way, were
Yeah.
so bad that they got him tossed out of the race. So maybe she should try to negotiate here. But I think
And trying
what
to
we
make that a
have,
thing. But again, she gets the other side is dealing not just with, Democrats and the Harris campaign, but sort of the media as another extension, as an
oh
apparatus
yeah, no,
to helping
they're
them
just a
because
Democratic super PAC. I mean, it
it
is
really is out of
wild what's
control.
happening.
Yeah.
By the way, if their take from the left and from the media is that, oh, he's backing out of this debate that was planned. Look, we have two candidates who agree that they should debate. They need to
Mhm.
come to agreed upon terms and do that. The other agreement is null and void. However, if that's the line they want to take, then she's committed to several debates with JD Vance.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. Speaking of it,
did something
yeah.
change in this race that means, huh, interesting.
Speaking of the enfeebled old man, Mary Catherine, did you see the interview with Nancy Pelosi where she was asked, had she spoken to Joe Biden? She said, "Not yet." I hope to. I hope to.
He's a little sore at me.
Yeah.
She didn't say that, but she
No,
should
she
have.
didn't. She didn't say that, but it was a little tough love. It was just tough love, and I'm glad that I'm sure she's glad that she was able to do what she had to do. And I'm sure he's fine.
She also had this to say in that interview with Leslie Stahl. Let's run the Mount Rushmore clip.
In a good place to make whatever decision, the top of his game. Such a consequential president of the United States, a Mount Rushmore kind of president of the United States. Want to know what comes next.
That he belongs up there on Mount Rushmore. Lincoln and Joe Biden.
But you got Teddy Roosevelt up there, and he's wonderful. I don't say take him down, but you can add Biden.
Look, politicians are an evolved species that do not need to feel embarrassment, and they can therefore ruthlessly power seek and
Yeah.
say this kind of thing with no concerns. Embarrassing.
Yeah, and it's funny again because you combine that with her not having spoken to Biden since he announced he's not running. So she was like, "Come on, I just suggested you'd be on Mount Rushmore. We're good now, right?"
We're good. We're
I
good.
don't think they'll ever forgive.
Oh, another thing that concerns me about the no questions. Look, she should get questions regardless because she's running for president of the United
Yeah.
States. She should be getting regularly tested about her views, about what's going on in the world. Another problem we have here is that I don't think Biden's doing the job. There seems to be some sort of
Oh,
power sharing going on here between the president, his aides, perhaps his vice president, and then
Right.
several heads of several agencies.
You don't know.
There was some suggestion that, military assets were moving around by the order of the Secretary of State the other day. Now, I don't know if that was just a tweet from a news organization that maybe was imprecise, but it speaks to a concern I have. And then you'll remember, I don't know if we've talked about it on the show, but last week, the Department of Justice, or was
Oh,
it
yeah.
was it Justice or Defense?
Well, it was initially the prosecutors and then later on the Department of Defense, Lloyd
Okay.
Austin.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
last week there was a plea deal announced for the masterminds of 9/11 where they would avoid the death penalty. And it's like, I understand objections to the death penalty and have them. However, if there's a case in which that seems warranted, the deaths of 3,000 people seems like it might be among them.
Yeah.
At any rate, they make this deal. It's announced right before the release of the hostages, or release of the prisoners from overseas. So Biden kind of got to romp with this good news story, although, we can talk about the incentives of making that deal with Russia and what that looks like in the future. But he gets
Right.
to romp this good story while it's overshadowing the KSM deal. Well, lo and behold, a couple days later, Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, announces, "Nah, that agreement is null and void. We're not doing that one. We were caught blindsided by that."
Again, there's no communication going on over
What's
here. It's just like,
happening?
what is happening? And nobody seems to, I don't know, it's like nobody seems to care that we don't really have a president right now. It's just this placeholder for the next few months until it's either going to be one or the other. To go back to briefly, you were talking about the prisoner exchange, and we're very happy that Evan Gershkovich and Paul Whelan and another, a woman, were able to be returned safely from Russian prisons where they were wrongly charged with espionage. It used to be that prisoner swaps were 1-to-1. It's like the famous Bridge of Spies, or you ever watch the movie White Knights, it's 1-for-1. Suddenly it's 3-for-26 or something like that. And they got back assassins. That's what's crazy. But they know they can do it. And that's the new standard. Once you go to that standard, there's no going back to 1-to-1.
This is the concern, right? Is that
Yeah.
it's obviously wonderful news that they're home.
Yeah, very.
And cause for concern that the new standard will be used against us
Right.
in the future and
They're just pawns.
could make more Americans in danger. That is just a real thing that's happening there.
The
Speaking
chilling
of-
effect. But you're going to say with one of the reasons that the prosecutors gave for making this plea deal, if you will, and going for life for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and others, 9/11 plotters, was they were concerned that they would lose the case pushing for the death penalty because that some of the confessions were extracted under duress or under torture. I still found that to be a weak argument. And certainly, I think so many families were so upset that clearly Lloyd Austin had gotten the brunt of that blowback and therefore was like, no, this is unacceptable.
Well, and I think that certainly that call was going to be a political issue for the Democrat ticket moving forward. Again, if they get ever asked a question. Speaking of which, the markets melted down yesterday in a fashion that is, at the very least, deeply concerning in the medium term. You know, this is my most trad wife trait, is that Steve just looks at the 401k and I do not. And so I'm like, I'm happy to have that off my plate today. I don't need to log into nothing. So you just kind of like put your blinders on that front. But look, I think from an admittedly inexpert point of view, to me, it feels like the economy has never really had a reckoning post-COVID. You cannot stop the global economy, unplug it, and then hope to plug it back in and everything works out fine. We lost so many businesses, so much wealth. People were crushed, careers were crushed. The potential of people's careers were crushed by all of this stopping.
Yeah.
And
small business,
commercial real estate crushed. Yeah. And I just think that it never felt like it really hit the way that one might expect it to. And I am a little concerned that this is what we're reaping now. That we were left.
A delayed reckoning? Is that what you're saying?
That's sort of what it feels like. And so people are talking about recession. Of course, the last time there was technically a recession under the Biden administration, the press decided to redefine recession.
Yeah.
So it was 2 quarters of negative growth, but then they decided, no, that doesn't count because Biden, and they changed it. But like things look not great right now. And to a point that I can't imagine any other campaign in my lifetime where if the markets had done that, the presidential candidates would not both have had energetic questioning about exactly that issue. And yet, nothing for Kamala Harris. Nothing at all.
Because Trump is more than eager to have this discussion because it's not on his watch. To go back to the first thing you were saying, apparently studies show that it's generally best not to check your portfolio every day. So good for you. And the other thing is, unless you're in dire need of that, nest egg, and I understand it for older people when it comes to, their retirement accounts, there is that sense of panic. And there was a bit of panic that happened yesterday, and everybody wants to immediately dump stocks. They have this urge to then go into bonds and T-bills and whatnot. But in general, if you have some liquid cash and you've been saving up, these are, the upside is that's a great opportunity to snatch up a bunch of stocks that you've been meaning to get into, but they are way too expensive. So that's including Starbucks, I would say. But generally, it's best not to check. Now, the problem, of course, is, as you mentioned, it's a globalized economy. This market plunge has been blamed on something called carry trades, which is, stocks purchased with Japanese yen, but then you're dependent on what happens to the rate in Japan. And if something goes wrong there, then it's going to go wrong for you. And hence we have this pattern because the Japanese, the Nikkei, I think, plunged to its lowest level, I think, since like 1987, they said it was the steepest decline, which makes me worried for all that stock I've invested in Japanese companies like Datsun. I hope they're still around. I haven't checked. I haven't checked in a few years.
That's a reliable car.
What happened to Datsun? Yeah, no, I have no idea. I will say this, liberal friends of mine would insist all the time that the economy is great, not to pay attention to the mortgage rate, which was like at 6.7 now, right? Or the interest rate for financing a car, which depending on your credit rating, if it's low, it's like 13%. And pay no attention to unemployment or the inflation rate. They would always say, look at the stock market. How's your 401k? I've been asked that. And you know what? It's not good right now. But I think Goldman Sachs at the moment says it's about a 1 in 4 chance of a recession. So we'll see. Obviously it hasn't happened, and there are ways that this can be averted. But you're right. There are a lot of great questions that could be asked.
No, I truly, and I'm not trolling.
Candidate.
I'm not concerned trolling. I would like to know what people who are running for president think about how you should address these issues that are kind of scary to people. I would like to know. I would like to know if she knows anything about carry trading. I would like to know what briefings she's received. I
Yeah.
would like to know if, in fact, it's true from some old reporting that her suggestion when Biden became president was to make it a $4 trillion aid package instead of a $1 trillion aid package. And that was rejected by President Biden. And would she like to continue with that philosophy when she gets into office? Because I'd love to know if she wants to quadruple down on the inflation we're already seeing, or if she thinks that that would be helpful. That's a thing we should know.
Right.
But
Do you want to solve our problems by printing more money?
I mean,
Because we joke about this, but there are some people who make this argument even now, like seriously. So,
well,
sorry.
and
Okay.
and on this front, I also say that sort of running against Harris as a San Francisco Democrat, as a San Francisco liberal, as a California liberal, all of those things are fair game. And particularly on the California front, as we're learning just recently that there's like a stampede out of that state
Yeah.
because of policies in that state by large corporations that do not want to be there. So just recently, I think we've seen Tesla leave. We've seen Charles
Yes.
Schwab leave. Oracle already moved a while ago. The latest company is Chevron. And I guess California's take is like, ew, those big companies with lots of employees are icky anyway because
Right.
Elon and
Fossil
oil
fuels.
and things.
Yeah.
But no, it does not bode well for the California model. And Kamala Harris, as a California politician, is on record many times saying what she wants to export is the California model to the rest of the United States. And I would suggest that that should go in some ads and
Yeah.
people should think about whether they want that exported to the rest of the United States.
Right. I mean, if that's what you want, I mean, that's why I always thought it was kind of, ridiculous that J.B. Pritzker was in the mix for a possible running mate, as if we want to be more like, or Gavin Newsom, that we were going to be more like Illinois or California. If you want more of that, these are your candidates,
I found that one so weird. Is it just because he's really rich?
I guess, and a very large neck. So it's sort of like
Maybe that's what she's looking for.
he's sort of like that Midwest sort of, a steak guy.
He's a
kind of
beefy
guy.
man. Yes.
Yeah.
Both
Yeah.
Pritzker and Walz are beefier dudes.
Yeah.
Walz, by the way, enjoys a 50+% approval rating in his
He
home
does.
state. So
Okay.
despite the fact that it doesn't seem like he manages state government very well and
Yeah.
let Minneapolis burn for several days, it doesn't seem like that's affected him too much in that state. Again, a safe blue state. But I do think, truthfully, I think if she had put Shapiro on this ticket, she would have put it away.
Yeah. Yeah. And, but who is probably happy that he wasn't picked? John Fetterman, arch
It's-
nemesis.
Yeah, speaking of beef, what's the beef there?
So both of them served on a parole board together in the state parole board, and they would have these issues where Fetterman was, much more lax on criminals, and Shapiro would have to be like, countering Fetterman every step of the way and disagreeing with sentencing guidelines and such. And so, Shapiro again, tougher on crime. And so Shapiro, this is when Fetterman was lieutenant governor. So anyway, that was the problem. And so there's no love lost between those two men. But here we are.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, should we do a quick Israel update?
Sure.
This is another thing that, a presidential candidate would be traditionally asked about on the trail, that things are heating up in the Middle East. The latest conflagration, which is like sort of
Yeah.
ongoing in general, what was kicked off by Hezbollah in Lebanon hitting a soccer field where it killed 12 children. Druze Israelis. Israel, of course, is sworn to defend those members of its pluralistic society and
Yeah.
will do so, and hit 2 terrorist leaders in 2 foreign states using all of its spy capabilities. Pretty competent looking work there on Israel's part. In fact, there were some rumors that they had maybe set the bomb in Iran that took out one of these leaders 2 months before.
Yeah, months before. And, it's funny, our Andrew Stiles at the Beacon, the headline to his terrific newsletter, which you should all subscribe to after this happened. After this is the blowing up of Ismail Haniyeh of Hamas in Tehran after he was there for the Iranian president's inauguration celebration, and he got blown up. And the headline to Stiles' newsletter was, "I specifically asked for a room with no bomb." So, It's, but it is funny. And, the joke is that there's some, you know, Israeli guy, some Mossad guy, just waiting for the opportunity to press that button. And 2 months later, okay, do it now. Okay, great, and it happened. But again, I don't think they have actually admitted to that. Whereas they admitted to the taking down of other Hamas commanders, and then there's also the possibility that they had, inside help to
Right.
get that bomb placed.
Well, and Biden, as usual, the leaks coming from inside his administration say that he's scolding
Oh yeah,
Israel over these hits because these hits might escalate. Look, winning actually helps not escalate
yeah,
because if Iran knows that its high level operatives
right,
are not safe, even in its own territory, they're
right,
going to get maybe a bit more wary about executing soccer fields full of 12
right.
children. By the way, specifically targeting terrorists in such an effective way that
Yeah,
they didn't even take out the guy next door's room
right.
is exactly the kind
Mhm.
of hit without collateral damage that you should be looking for if
Yeah,
your line, as Biden's has been, is that you need to do this without civilian collateral damage. These, in fact, were very careful
right.
and taken care of in far flung places with almost no extra damage.
Right. And it's also surprising that the Iranians or Hamas don't realize that, the Israelis are very patient about these things. You could be old, you could be in a nursing home drooling. They'll still get you. 50 years from now, they will find you and blow you up. No, but you're right. The U.S. strategy of not wanting to go after the people who are plotting to kill you. And I know the press has had some ridiculous takes on Hania, calling him the moderate. He was somebody who wanted the ceasefire.
Right.
Oh, also
Now
to keep the hostages, but
now
wanted the
we'll never
ceasefire.
have peace because they
Yeah.
executed the wrong terrorist.
Yeah. I mean, and it's part of their larger sort of mistaken foreign policy and defense policy, which is not to go after, enemy assets on enemy soil. You can only go after them once they enter your airspace. So, I mean, the Israelis might know where the launchers are. They're going to launch a massive missile attack. And the US would say, okay, well, wait till it comes over you to hit them. And
Right.
that's it. Whereas because if you went and took them out on their soil, well, that would escalate things. They're launching missiles at you. If Hezbollah
Well,
decides with Iran's permission to launch, 200,000 rockets and precision guided rockets on, and rain, terror on Tel Aviv, that's not escalating. It would be the response that's escalating.
yes, exactly. And the important thing for people to know about Hezbollah is that it does have precision guided
Yeah.
weaponry. It is very different from what Hamas had available to it, which was much more rudimentary. And they could overwhelm Iron Dome and they could hit Tel Aviv. And the free citizens of Tel Aviv, our ally,
Right.
would have to live underground while that is happening. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a distinct possibility. And I would love to know if anybody on the Democratic ticket knows any of this, is conversant in it, has ideas about it. I will say, people are saying she hasn't gotten one question. She's gotten one question. Do you know what it was? On the tarmac while they were welcoming the Americans back, she got asked a question that was essentially like, it was hard to hear, but it was basically like, how do you feel, Madam Vice President, about this really good thing? That was it. That's the question she's gotten. When you had a shot at her,
Yeah.
that's what you did.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
her reaction, of course, everyone is already talking about how ridiculous it was. It was a response straight from the TV show Veep. So, but again, and one final thought about the U.S. strategy, it also applies to Ukraine, where they're very concerned about Ukraine going after Russian assets on Russian soil. I remember the concern because they hit like a fuel depot in Russia. Oh no, don't do that again. Wait till they cross your border and then go after them, even though they're coming. This is no way to win a war. It just isn't. So that's why,
On the
and I
other
guess
hand,
Israel is contemplating a preemptive strike. You know,
yeah,
may or may not happen by the time of this taping.
I forgot to cover this earlier, but I don't want to miss it. Trump talking
Oh,
junk about, speaking of popular governors, Tim Walz is hitting 50 plus in Minnesota.
yeah,
Brian Kemp in Georgia hits 60 plus regularly.
yeah,
That is a wild approval number. That is beyond just partisan Republicans. that brings in all the independence that you need for a win in the state of Georgia.
And
And yet
yet,
Trump, because he has a longtime feud, well, sort of one-sided feud
it's a
with
one-sided
Kemp
feud.
over the fact that Kemp didn't think 2020 was stolen from him in the state of Georgia.
Right.
He rightly thought if you're a Republican candidate losing the state of Georgia while everyone else is winning it handily on the Republican ticket, perhaps you have done something wrong.
Right. It was down ballot that did better than the president did.
Yes, and that has continued to happen in runoffs. It has continued to happen in statewide elections where Republicans continue to rack up numbers that Trump and Trump-endorsed candidates cannot.
Right.
So I would suggest that maybe talking trash about Kemp and his wife, who apparently, due to this feud, is none too friendly to the idea of a Trump ticket. This is not helpful to you. This is not helpful to you. It's a jerk move. It's immature. It's just anytime in a presidential run where you are talking about 4 years ago, you are not talking about the future. You are not
No.
prosecuting a case against your opponents, which, by the way, you must because the media will not do it for you. So
This
like,
is
dumb move, man.
this is like, this is not 3D chess. This is just an utter lack of self-discipline and sheer pettiness. And so, everyone thinking about, the assassination attempt and how that might change him or soften him. No, it hasn't. And he still holds these old grudges. And okay, fine. I get that. We're all human in different ways. We have these various failings, but you're running for president. You want to win Georgia. And it would be nice to have you and the governor and let bygones be bygones. And yet here he is at the rally, and he must somehow think that because they're all there supporting him for president, that he could then turn them against the governor. So when he got, trash talks Brian Kemp, he's hoping that everyone, the supporters of the rally will start booing. And then what? And then what?
And-
I don't understand it. And, this has got to be driving, again, the Trump team, Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, nuts.
One would
Because,
think.
there's this whole middle of the country, these undecideds, the independents, it's all ripe for the taking. And this is what he's spending his time doing. Don't
do it. And Kemp, for his part, is not a petty guy, which is why he's been successful, which is why he's popular. He is
Yeah.
a competent governor with a very good get out the vote machine. And he will
Yeah.
not withhold resources from a Republican ticket. But this is just an incredibly stupid and immature thing to do. And, I would suggest not doing that in swing states. Trump largely is the reason that Georgia goes blue at all.
Yeah.
In those runoffs, in the Senate races, in the presidential race.
I mean, again,
You're the one who broke this ground, my friend. Perhaps go back to Kemp's way of doing things.
Georgia now has 2 U.S. senators who are Democrats, John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. Just think about that. And they're not very good. They were not great candidates.
Yeah. When it comes to the scoreboard in Georgia, Trump is Georgia Tech to UGA.
Oh, wow.
Wow. It's a real thing. Okay.
Georgetown basketball would play Georgia State. Where do they fit in this?
Georgia State is I don't know that much about it.
Okay.
That's like my diplomatic UGA response.
You know what? But if you look at Mary, listeners won't be able to see Mary Catherine's face is very kind of sad and sympathetic looking when she was talking about Georgia State. So okay.
All right. Let's end with a little bit of sports. I just want to do an update on Harrison Butker. You'll remember him as the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs that everybody got real mad at because he's a devout Catholic who gave a speech for graduation at a devout Catholic university.
Oh, yeah.
And he thanked his wife profusely for being an incredible mother and wife, and how that vocation could be really rewarding and may in fact be the thing that some women enjoy more than doing other things. And everyone was like, he's oppressing me. And I was like, I don't think Harrison Butker has the power to oppress you. And I don't think this message does that. The latest on him is that the Kansas City Chiefs are standing behind him and for years to come because they agreed to a $25.6 million contract extension, which I believe makes him the highest paid kicker in the NFL.
Oh,
So,
amazing.
remember I remember a lot of Swifties who were new to the football
Oh,
situation were like, they're gonna get rid of him because
right.
they can't have them ruining
Yeah.
their new audience and new fans. But in fact, he's very good at kicking. So he's gonna get a lot of money to kick.
It's great news for Harrison Butker, his family, and all those fans of the Tridentine Mass and the Missa Cantata. No, it's really like it's like the ending of Jerry Maguire when Rod Tidwell gets told that he's getting the well-deserved contract extension. It's very exciting. So good for him. Good for him. And Mary Catherine, that's not the only news involving
Indeed, I think there's some other important
sports and
news.
kicking balls and whatnot. Okay. You talking about Kamala Harris flip-flopping. Go ahead. What's
Oh,
going on over
dear.
here?
You know what? I'm gonna pull up E-News. It was hard
Okay.
to find an outlet that
Yeah.
I could read from.
Oh, I could report it if you want me to.
Okay, you go ahead. You go ahead, sir.
Okay, all
A
right.
little content warning on this if you got anyone other than like 8. Actually, this is perfect for 8-year-old boys. They love this content. Like
It's funny because it's actually my level
it
of
is,
qu-
this is like
of
a
humor.
very juvenile segment
Yeah,
we're going
yeah.
to do.
Okay, it's really so. I'm just as is. I'm just reporting this as is. We report, you decide, as they used to say.
Mhm.
Anthony Ammirati of France made it to the semifinals and pole vaulting, attempting to vault over 5.7 meters when his pole got in the way.
Mm.
So you have to see the video for yourself. And I just want to say, if you've seen the video, I'm glad he wasn't competing in the uneven bars or the pummel horse, shall we say. He finished 12th. He finished 12th, so talk about getting the shaft. But he's more like, to me, he's more like a 7 or an 8, not a 12. And he did later, he expressed, this is true, he expressed disappointment, but he made no mention of how he lost.
Mhm.
So I'm just going to say, you look at the video and I've checked him out, so to speak. He's talented, he's athletic, he's an Olympian. Mary Catherine, he's got the whole package.
Mhm.
If you ask me, he's still cock of the walk. That's what I got for you.
Thank you for this
That's-
reporting.
Yes.
We almost flew him to Paris to do this segment.
That's right. That's right. Okay. I'm going to leave it out there. There was a couple of other things, but I'm going to keep
Oh,
it
no,
safe
please,
and
please,
clean.
go
No.
on.
Is there anything else? Are we good? Is that it for this episode?
No, I do think that was a real win by losing
Oh, it
situation
totally
for
is.
that guy.
You know what's funny? So he has a very low profile presence on Twitter.
Not anymore.
Yeah, no, he's really stuck his head out there, and you should see the comments. It's quite something. But again, he's totally downplaying this. So
Well, that is mature of him, not of us. We're not called to be mature.
No, we can't keep it sorry about that. But there you go. That's your content warning if you are below the age of 8. Okay. I guess that wraps up this episode of Getting Hammered. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Victorino Mattis.
I'm at MK Hammer on Twitter, at MK Hammer Time on Instagram. You can follow the show at Getting Hammered Podcast on YouTube and Instagram and see our faces when we're in the studio. Thanks for being here. Thanks for getting hammered responsibly. This has been a Nebulous Media podcast.